Hello, my name is Jamil Jadallah. I'm Vice President of Solutions Management at Bringu, and I'm here to talk to you about why the goal is not the platform. And to be honest, it was never about your platform. A properly functioning platform blends into the background, just like our roads. And you only notice them when you're broken. And we need to shift our approach on the value and the promise that roads and platforms can provide, because I would argue that today we've lost focus of that. And over the past 5 years, we've all had a lot of opportunities to get seats at tables that we've never had, and it's been wonderful, right? And we've gotten our hands on awesome technologies, that have been game changing for our companies and our careers. But I think we're losing a little bit of sight of what's important when it comes to those platforms. And I'm here to talk to you about how we need to change our thinking and how we talk about them. So let's talk about how this happened. If you look at these six, hopefully they are familiar or they make sense to you, and I'll talk about, the reasons. But, I've been working on, building platforms for a number of years now, and there have been a few things that have stood out to me that I'd like to talk to you about. One of them is the growth and popularity of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and it's been great. It's given us access to a lot of technologies. It's created an enormous community of practice. Shifted the way that our business stakeholders and our companies think about technology and its place within it. However, I think it's also created another set of challenges, which is, because we can see all the ingredients, we all think we can be great cooks, right? And that it's easy to mix and match different things together. And, when you look at the landscape, there's almost like a sense of what are the right choices? What are the right combinations? What are the right things to put together? And, it's been incredibly amazing to see the growth, but I also would argue it's created a lot of challenges in terms of expectations from our customers because, you see the technology, you want to integrate into it, and, you just figured out how to do a lot of, just systems integration across different tools together and secure them, make them work well together and play nice in the same sandbox. But it's also meant that, at any given time, you're constantly trying to keep a lot of things in place and aligned with each other. And the next point I want to bring up is along those lines, which is, the architecture and the complexity of platforms has increased exponentially. A lot of times I like to play the exercise of how many different layers we think are in a platform. And, it can go from like 5 to, X amount if you start thinking about the infrastructure and, the other layers. And so as that complexity has grown, I would also say that, like how do we talk about those platforms also needs to shift because there's a lot of things that are in the box or not in the box. And, when someone says, I want things to be turnkey, a lot of times it's hard to have nuanced conversations around what that actually means and how to make that successful. The other part that I think has been really noticeable, at least over the last, few years, is this idea that there's this tension amongst platforms, which is giving security and consistency with autonomy, right? You want your platform to be adopted, you want people to use it, you want people to have that, but we haven't necessarily always found the right ways to negotiate and talk about what are the things that we're willing to live with from our users or our app teams or the security folks that are looking into the platform, right? And so there's this constant push and pull and tension that we're navigating with our platforms because we spend a lot of time building them, we want them to get out the door. Our business stakeholders have invested a lot of money into those platforms and they want to start seeing the value, but we haven't always been necessarily great at explaining why there's a tension and where those compromises have to come from. And, talking about this platform is going to solve our problems. I think I've noticed that organizations, sometimes look at these platforms as like not like an easy button, right? But they become projections of what's wrong with their, the way they're doing things. And that could be across a number of different things, how they manage their monitoring, how they think about their CI or how they do their CD or, like we can't build and deploy code in time. Well, maybe the reasons are outside of your platform, right? But your platform becomes the forcing function or the thing that's supposed to solve it for that. And a lot of times it's created enormous pressure for us in terms of how do we navigate that and explain that when we're there talking about what our platform is going to solve. Another thing is, the end of the zero interest rate policy, right? Or ZIRP. And, you may have seen a lot of articles about this, but, over the last few years, it's given our community and our industry enormous opportunities to explore different ideas think about how we solve things, but it gave the impression that you can just throw money at these problems. And I would say that that fiscal environment has changed now, and we need to be honest about what it means for the way we do things and how we think about building our platforms to the problems that they can solve. And I think it gave a lot of people also the runway to try to find product market fit, or try to figure out how they can take an idea and to turn it into something over time. And there's been a lot of people that had ideas and they haven't been able to survive this changing fiscal environment. And I think it's okay for us to acknowledge that the goalposts around what people are expecting have changed. And the last point is, I've been very lucky in my career to work with some of the most brilliant people that are always teaching me new things and how to think about software and platforms and architectures and business problems. And the reality is, this stuff is just hard. Like, I think a lot of times we make it look easy, or we're keeping a lot of different thoughts and things in our head, and we don't ever articulate or feel comfortable sharing with our colleagues or with our business stakeholders that, like, this stuff is hard. And we have to recognize that and give ourselves some grace and acknowledge that none of this is easy. And if you're going to do it and do it well, that it isn't necessarily going to be easy. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how Bringu did things a little bit different, and how we differentiated ourselves, and how we took some of these things that we've learned and integrated them into our platform. And we're big on the mission and serving the mission, especially in the communities that we support and the people that use our platform and our products. But one of the things that I think we've done really well is thinking about all the things that support our stakeholders and the mission, not just the mission. And so, one of the things that we really like to think about is our view is that platforms are like referees. A good referee is never noticed. And so, from my perspective, I always love to hear when someone says, "Oh, I did not realize that our application was running on structure," or "Wow, you guys have been running in production at these higher impact levels for so long. I had no idea." And I think that's part of the point, right? Is that we focus on not making it about us in order for us to show value to our stakeholders and our customers. And I think that's really important. And a couple of things that I think that I would like to point out to you is, thinking about differentiations, because like I was talking about the CNCF, everybody can see what everybody else is building, right? Or thinking about building. And I think we're kind of converging across some similar patterns and like combinations of tools. But the thing is that, like, I always ask my team, like, well, what are we going to do that's going to differentiate ourselves from others? And so for us, I'd offer that our focus on enabling our platform to, have a solution for disrupted, disconnected, intermittent, and low bandwidth solutions for our customers is a key differentiator of how our platform can be different. And if you think about your platforms, it's not necessarily going to be the tooling that you use. It's going to be like what happens because of that tooling that's going to enable you to stand out from the field, right? And another thing that we've done that I think is, really encouraging, and I encourage all of us to think about is, we focus a lot on building platforms for developers, but we also have to consider the people that are also involved in what is produced by those developers. And that could be the compliant folks, that could be the security teams. And, I think one of the things that we've done is think beyond just the initial developer experience and focusing on like how it can help the organization be successful. So, I like to joke that like soft skills are the hard skills when it comes to these things. And so there are a couple of things I think that could be very successful for you as you're going through this journey and, changing the language that we use when we talk about our platforms. One of the things that, I would focus on is like focus on your principles. Your principles are never going to change, or hopefully won't change if they're good. And although the technology may change, if your principles are solid, it's not going to be a big deal to your customer or your teams if you make a decision to change the technology. Another thing is, don't be afraid to be boutique. I think there's a little bit of like, let's be more humble. Let's not talk about what our platform can provide, which I think has been a lost opportunity, And I think for us, being a little boutique, talking about why our approach is different. And, I like to talk about the idea that like our code represents our expertise, and our customers are buying our expertise. And so we should not be afraid or shy away from being a little bit boutique. I'm a big fan, and I wish I could be better at, information architecture and the language that people use, but I think it's a very powerful thing when you listen and hear how people talk about things. So always be focused on the language and the vocabulary people use to talk about your platform or their businesses, and also make sure that you identify if they have shared mental models, because a lot of times what someone thinks comes in the box is not necessarily what comes in the box. And so we always have to be careful about navigating that, because if we don't, it could lead to misplaced expectations from our customers. Good platforms are like referees. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote of a platform that is not our own that I think is really special, which was, I love the way Shopify does things. I went looking for a retro Zinedine Zidane jersey, and I found this small vendor that had the jersey in the size that my son could fit, and I went to buy it, right? And only at the end did I see that they had integrated with Shopify. And I found that very illuminating around, like, wow, they integrated themselves into the whole experience, but didn't make it about themselves. They enabled that vendor who was selling those retro jerseys to be able to put it in the hands of their customer. And I think for all of us, if we think about our platforms from that lens around, like, not just the UX of like personas or user journeys or things like that, but like how to blend into the background, is going to make it easier for us to get back to, keeping ourselves in the conversations, striving to make better platforms, and, focusing the conversations away from solely on the technology. One thing I've also seen that has been really, really challenging is, the idea that, you can be a master for everything. Like, your platform can do everything well. And to be honest with you, that is never the case. So you have to focus on a couple things and don't be a master of none. Because if you're a master of none, you're always going to be set up against misplaced expectations. Then again, back to the language thing, focus on learning the language of your organization and the customer base. And if you figure that out and where your platform fits within it, just like a good referee, they're there, but they're not noticeable, you'll be set up for success. Now, if you need to talk about your platform, here are some ways that you can do it. One is focusing on the conversation on what matters to your organization. I like a framework that talks about like things like revenue. Either this platform is going to help revenue go up or go down, or we need to manage risk, reduce our risk portfolio, or we're comfortable with running a little bit of risk, or we need to grow into this market or shrink the time to market. And so, there's different ways of thinking about that, but if you listen to what your stakeholders are talking about, they will tell you what is important. And I think it's important for us to consider that. Also think about where your organization, your stakeholders see themselves with the organization, because they may be representing a department, a viewpoint of how to do things that you may not have exposure to. And then, part of it is removing ourselves and having some, like empathy and thinking through, like, why does my compliance officer need to care about this? What does their boss need to care about? What does the security team care about? And what do their bosses and their stakeholders care about? And I think if you do that, you're going to find ways in which your platform can support your organization and also not be, by itself just a platform, right? It's going to seamlessly integrate into the workflow of your organization and help you solve some business problems. And again, remember the point about the referee. I think it's important to consider the idea that if your platform is high friction or is preventing people from getting what they need to do done, they're not going to use your platform anymore. And if you look around and you see everybody's building platforms, clearly we need to think about what that actually looks like and have some understanding as a community away from solely the technology of what's the right way for a platform to be involved in things and not be the thing that we talk about in a negative light, like a referee that makes it about themselves at the end of the game. So in conclusion, this is something that really resonated with me amongst some of my peers and colleagues at work, which was, the idea that we only talk about things when they're broken, and like, I love to drive, and, I love driving, but then I'll notice the roads only if the roads are broken, right? And so for us, when we talk about things that are like solely around like the CNCF, we spend a little bit less time talking about the developer experience, right? And then if we're talking about the developer experience and not thinking about the bigger picture around the missions or the applications of those missions that those applications support, we're going to struggle, and we're going to keep on trying to build the other platform that's going to solve those things for everybody. So I encourage us to think about thinking deeper about what that application is trying to do and not just trying to onboard that application, as it's going to help us figure out how to build the right platforms for the people that we work with in our community. Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.